Hello everyone. On behalf of Research Hall Incorporation, I would like to extend a warm welcome to you all. Thank you for taking the time to join this training. We guarantee that your time here will be well spent. This training was sponsored by Research Hall Incorporation. You may be wondering who Research Hall is. Well, Research Hall is a research and development company. It was founded in 2020 with the aim of building a community of researchers that look out for one another. After doing study among postgraduate students, it became clear that pursuing a master's or doctoral degree can be a lonely endeavor. Many students lose interest midway through their studies, and some give up entirely. That is because they do not receive the essential aid and assistance to complete their studies. Postgraduate students do poorly, and that is due to lack of sufficient guidance and help. That's where the idea for Research Hall came from. We've decided to form a network of experienced researchers to lend a helping hand to postgraduate students. As a company, we offer both free and paid services. Amongst our free services includes training such as this one, as well as useful information that can help you through your research and much more. The information is shared through our blog page as well as through our social media platform. Our paid service range from research topic selection up to when you graduate. We have a wide range of research assistants from different fields of study who have been trained to take you through the path of research. To learn more about our services, please head on to our website. As I previously mentioned, we do offer training and free content on topics related to research. To keep up with that, do follow us on our social media platforms, as we constantly post useful information there. That includes blog link, training date, our latest offer, and much more. Without further ado, let me introduce our facilitator for today's training. His name is Dr. Chima. Dr. Chima is currently a postdoctoral fellow at University of Cape Town. He is also a full-time lecturer at Abia State University, Nigeria. Dr. Chima has a vast range of experience in research. He served as a research scholar on the UNESCO Global Project on Indigenous and Marginalized Youth in Sub-Saharan Africa, and a research fellow at the Institute for French Research in Africa. He was also a research grantee of the Social Science Research Council's African Peace Building Network, New York, USA. Dr. Chima has over 30 international publications to his credit. That shows us how well equipped Dr. Chima is to take us through this training today. His biographical information is too rich and lengthy to cover in one section, so I will stop here. At least the little bit I have given, it's enough to give us a glimpse of his credibility as our facilitator today. I will call on Dr. Chima now to start the training. Please remain muted to avoid background noise. Note down any question you may have along the training, and we will have a section at the end to answer some of them as time permits. If you have any general question regarding the company, please note it down as well, and we will answer it at the end. Dr. Chima, the word is yours now, and thank you for honoring our invitation.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm so happy to be here. And for us to rub minds is actually a platform for us to rub minds, for me to share some of the experiences I've had in research for over a decade now, and also learn from you, because basically I believe that learning should not be unidirectional. I mean, as a matter of fact, it should be multi-directional. You can learn from your students can as well learn from you. So that's by way of opening remarks. So we'll just go straight to the training. Let me try to share my screen. I have some slides to. All right, I've been asked to talk about the rudiments of writing an outstanding literature review. And that's what I'll be speaking on for an hour, 30 minutes, less. And I have some learning outcomes, some subheadings that we'll be looking at in the course of this lecture. The first one is characteristics of an excellent literature review. The techniques for developing a coherent literature review that is relevant to your research. The act of writing a literature review free of plagiarism. The strategies to identify research gaps and missing links in the literature. The methods for evaluating publications in order to determine which literature contributes significantly to your work. The criteria for deciding which literature to cite. So within the time that we have, we'll be looking at each of these issues in some detail. Now, before we begin, I think it is important for us to build a background, to lay a background to this lecture. And I will do that by just looking at a very simple definition of literature review. Now, it says a literature review is a survey of scholarly knowledge on a topic used to identify trends, debates, and gaps in the research. Now, you see, I've underlined some words in that definition, that very simple definition of literature review. Of course, I know we all know what a literature review is, but I had to place this simple definition for us to explain certain things about literature review, because this is a training and our emphasis is on the practical aspect of it rather than theoretical. Now, the first word there underlined is scholarly. Scholarly is a survey of scholarly. Now, what that means is that it is not every material that qualifies to be surveyed in a literature review. It is only materials that are scholarly. And if we break that word down further, we will understand that for a material or for a knowledge to be said to be scholarly, it means that it was systematically done. It's not just an assumption. It is not someone's dream. Maybe you just had a dream and then you put it down. It is something that was systematically done, following the procedures of producing knowledge production. So we say it's scholarly. We say it's scholarly. You know, you had to identify a problem, and then you had to formulate some objective or questions around that. And then you had to methods of data collection, and then you did analysis of the data before coming up with some findings, which constitute knowledge. So it means simply that it is not all materials that you see available that qualify to be reviewed in a literature review. So it has to be scholarly. It has to be a material that is produced after some thorough systematic examination. And then another word there is knowledge. It has to be knowledge, a scholarly knowledge, a body of knowledge. And we find these in texts. We find some of them in journals, in newsletters, and all of that. You know, it's a finding. It's something that advances humanity. That it's what we call knowledge. It's something new. It's something novel. And then on a topic, another word there is topic. It means that literature review, you don't just survey everything to make up a particular literature review. It has to be materials, it has to be topics that are related to a particular topic. So it is topic specific. And then used to identify trends, debates, and gaps in the research. And then you see we've underlined the words there: trends, debates, and gaps. Now, what do we mean by trends? What is the pattern of a particular field? What is the knowledge? What is the knowledge that is being disseminated? What form does it take? What are they saying actually? That's the trend of research. What's the trend? We need, so it means that when you review literature, your focus is on identifying the trend of research, the trend. What is current about this thing that is being done? And then you focus on debates. What are the arguments? What are the arguments that different scholars are advancing? What are they saying, and how do they back them up with their data? You focus on debates. And then you also focus on gaps. What has been done in the literature? What has someone done? This person A done? What has person B done? What has person C done? What is yet to be done? That is the gap. So it means that literature review, from this very simple definition, number one, you don't just, it's not every material that qualifies to be reviewed in a literature review. That captures the word there, scholarly. And it has to be something that advances humanity, knowledge. And it has to be within the ambit of a particular topic. It is not generic. You don't just have one literature review for everything. So it's not generic, it is specific. And it is aimed at letting us know what is going on in that area, in that topic area. What is going on? What are people saying? What are the issues that are trending? That's the trends. And then we look at the debates. Hello? We look at the debates. What are the issues that different scholars are advancing? And then we try to look at the gaps, what has been done and what has not been done with regard to that particular area. Now, the next one there is, because we are trying to lay background here, central to entire research venture. Now, it is important we understand that literature review is central to the entire research venture. You cannot do any research, as a matter of fact, without literature review. It is so vital. It is a critical aspect of any research. So it is very, very central to a research venture. It is very, very central. And then the next point there is, there's this very simple definition I was given when I was starting off as a lecturer. One of my lecturers told us that research simply means to search again. A search has been done, and you are repeating a search. That's what research is. But the search which you do begins with literature review. Now, what am I saying? For instance, even for you to identify a topic, you must have done some bit of literature review. For you to formulate a research problem, you must have done some level of literature review. For you to formulate objectives, for you to formulate research questions, for you to have a hypothesis, if applicable, for you to even know the method to apply, you must have done some bit of literature review. And so that's why I said it's very central to the entire research venture. And I try to bring it into perspective by saying that the search that we do when we say that research simply means doing research again begins with the literature review. So it's very important we understand that. And then the entire research venture is broken down into literature review and field work. What am I trying to do here? I'm just trying to emphasize the importance of literature review for you to understand how central it is to your research work. Now, I am saying that the entire research venture is broken down into two, the literature review and the field work. That's actually what you do for you to do a research. Because if you look at the structure of a research paper, be it a thesis or dissertation or whatever you produce after your research, you find out that the whole of chapter 1, the whole of chapter 2, and if methodology constitutes a different chapter, they are all, you know, you are only able to do them when you do some bit of literature review. So like I mentioned earlier, for you to formulate a research question, you have to do a bit of literature review, a research problem, a research objective, research questions, and even some aspect of methodology. You need to read the literature. So you see that literature review constitutes the bulk of what you do, pre-field work. And then the other aspect is going into the field, collecting data and all of that. And then you come back to do the analysis. So you see, it is a very important aspect of research. And that's why we need to pay very close attention to our lecture today. Now, the first item we have there is characteristics of an excellent literature review. And I'm picking the word excellent because that's the catch, that's the key word there. Features, you can call it characteristics, you can call it features of an excellent literature review. Now, the key word there is excellent. Now, a literature review may qualify to be said to be excellent if it is given birth to on the desk. You see, what most researchers do these days is that we just quickly jump into a particular topic. Maybe we just saw the topic somewhere, and or maybe we've read something about that topic, and before you know, we just say we have interest in researching this. But you find out that you have problems with the literature review. An excellent literature review is one that is given birth to on the desk. I remember those days, you know, when we were starting off. If you want to write a thesis or a dissertation, your supervisor will first give you a collection of books that are related to the area you said you want to study. You make those books available to you, or you can even recommend that you read some books. In fact, the first 3 months pre-research is dedicated to reading books. So before you can do a literature review that is said to be excellent, it must be given birth to on the desk. It means that you must give to reading. You must give to searching. You must sit down to read books, to consult texts, to consult other sources of knowledge, journals, monographs, edited books. Now, we're very lucky because we now have the internet. And so someone can just sit in the comfort of your home and then you access all these things. But those days when we didn't have internet, you had to visit libraries. That's to tell you how serious it was. That's to tell you that you have to pay the price of having an excellent literature review. You had to go for these books. You visit one library, you're able to see some books, and then you go to the other library. That's one of the part of the first phase of preparation. So what we're saying is that the number one feature of an excellent literature review is that it must be given birth to on the desk. If a literature review is not a product of consultation of books, reading books, sourcing my knowledge, then it is not excellent. The next one is that an excellent literature review is extant and not instant. Extant. What do we mean? It must be current. A literature review that is excellent must be current. It must be topical. Now, if you are doing a research in 2021, and then you are reviewing knowledge or scholarly works of more than a decade ago, then it does not qualify to be excellent literature review. It means that you have to go for those publications, you have to go for those works that are recent. Because one thing about knowledge is that with time, knowledge comes up different phases, different dimensions and all that. And so you can't be in 2021 and then you are reviewing knowledge that was produced a decade ago. Yeah, it might be important, but for the sake of the research you're doing, you need to look for recency. You need to give attention to recency. The publications, the books, the knowledge that you consult must be recent. It has to be something that will significantly add to knowledge. It must be topical. It has to be something that we are talking about. Otherwise, it becomes history. And then the next one is that an excellent literature review is one that focuses on reviewing, not quoting. There's a world of difference between quoting or citing a work and reviewing a work. When you quote a work, you simply tell us what that work is all about. But when you review a work, it's more like producing an abstract of that work. And what do we find in an abstract? You find the major objectives of the work. You find the methodology. You find the major findings. You find the conclusion and recommendation, if any. So an excellent literature review is one that is actually reviewed and not quoted. Is one where knowledge or sources of knowledge, books, journals, publications are reviewed and not quoted. It's very important. And then what also constitutes an excellent literature review is that it talks concepts. You see, part of the things is a very vital aspect of literature review. Concepts. You have to identify the concepts that are related to your study. You have to identify the concepts that are relevant to your study. And those concepts must be discussed. In some, we have different house styles for presenting a literature review. Like in my school, what we do first is to have the conceptual framework, followed by theoretical framework and empirical studies. These are the three major aspects of a literature review. So a literature review is only excellent when the concepts that are relevant to that work or to that study or to that project are reviewed, are talked about, are discussed. And we don't just, what do you do when we say you discuss them? You synthesize views. Now, if, for instance, you have a concept, a particular concept, you've identified a concept that is related to your study. Now, what do? You now present the views, the opinions of different people about that concept. The views, the opinions of different scholars about that concept. And after doing that, you try to synthesize these views. How do you do a synthesis of the views? You try to analyze the strengths of each of these positions about that concept. You try to analyze the strength and the weakness of each of those positions about the concept. And that's what we mean by synthesizing reviews. So a literature review that is lacking in terms of relevant concept is not excellent. And even when you have those concepts captured, if there is no synthesis of the views, it does not qualify to be called an excellent literature review. So you must identify the concepts related to the study, and you must present different positions of scholars about that concept, and then do analysis of the strength and weakness of each of those definitions or explanations of those concepts. That's what we mean by synthesizing the views. And then another aspect of a literature review is the theories, the theoretical framework. Now, an excellent literature review is one that captures the theory that is relevant to that study. It can be it can be one theory, it can be a combination of theories. Now, number one is that it must talk about the theory or theories relevant to that study, the theories that account for what you're studying, the theory that explains what you're studying. You know, this is built on our understanding that nothing is new, as a matter of fact. What you think is new has been done by someone else. It could be that the person did not take the perspective that you are looking on, or the person is looking at it from a different dimension. So for us, as researchers, what we do is to build your study on a particular theory, to hinge it on a particular theory. And one of the features of excellent literature review is that you must identify the theory or theories, as the case may be, and synthesize them. What do we mean by synthesis? Synthesizing them. Number one is when you mention a theory that is relevant to your study, it is important to tell us the propounder of the theory. It is important to tell us the major assumptions of the theory or the major tenets of the theory. And very importantly, you need to relate that theory to your work. Now, when we talk about synthesizing them because before you, of course, you choose a particular theory, you have to justify it. Part of the justification is that you look at other theories and account for why they are deficient in your study. That's part of synthesizing them. If you are choosing a particular theory now, then you have to justify your choice of that theory. And what do you do in justification of your choice? You tell us, well, this theory A is also related to this, theory B is also related to this, theory C is also related to it. But theory A cannot be used for social reason. Theory B cannot be used for social reason. Theory C cannot be used for social reason. And that's why I'm using this theory. That's what we mean by synthesizing those theories. And that's what makes a literature review an excellent one. And lastly, empirical studies. That's another important aspect of a literature review and what makes it excellent too. If a literature review does not contain empirical studies, it is not excellent. Now, you see, this is where some students have problems, particularly beginners. They have problems because you need to know what an empirical study is. You have to look out for studies that were carried out after data collection. There must be a clear means of data collection and analysis of data for you to constitute an empirical study. The word there, empirical, means that data is involved. It's not a product of assumption. It is not a product of conjecture, someone just thinking of something and then you put it down. No, it is a research or it's a study that is born out of data collection, field work, collecting data, analysis of data. And where do you find these kind of studies? You find them in journals. You find them in edited books. You find them in newsletters. You find them in all sorts of these scholarly publications. You hardly find them in textbooks. Textbooks just talk about a specific thing and they devote the space talking about a particular subject. But empirical studies are mostly found in journals and edited books. And that is why if you are out to produce an excellent literature review, you must be looking out for, you must know journals that are relevant to the field that you are working on. Journals, now we're lucky to have the internet, so you can access journals electronically. You don't have to visit libraries to consult, to see journals, or consult journals. You can subscribe to journals electronically and have copies sent to you. So you identify the journals that are related to what the area you're studying, and then look out for studies that are related to the specific topic that you're working on. And then these studies will constitute your empirical studies. And what do you do in empirical studies? So you need to mention previous studies related to what you're studying. Because like I said earlier, nothing is new. What you claim to be doing that is new, someone else has done it. And so you have to look at what other people have done, and then you'll be able to capture what they have done. And in doing that, you do a review. Remember we mentioned earlier that there is a lot of difference between reviewing and quoting. You focus on reviewing those works. You try to capture what are the major findings of that, major objective of that work, the methodology adopted, major findings, what is the conclusion. That's reviewing a work. So each of the studies that you are going to capture, you have to review them using these indices that we have mentioned. And it's important I tell you that you do that chronologically using the date of publication. If you have 5 studies, empirical studies that you want to review, and you have the earliest one or the oldest one was published in 2010. Supposing you have a work published in 2010, you have another one published in 2015, 2020, for instance. Then it has to follow that order. 2010, you review the one of 2010 before first, followed by the one of 2015, then the one of 2021. What we are doing, because if you don't follow that order, we won't be able to see the trend of research in that area. So it must follow that order so that when someone is reading, you'll be able to flow, you'll be able to identify the trend of research in that particular area, subject area. So when you're able to review these studies, you're also synthesizing them. And part of the synthesis is for you to show how similar or different these studies are among themselves and in relation to your own study. That's by way of synthesizing them. The next one is the techniques for developing a coherent literature review that is relevant to your research. The techniques for developing a coherent literature review that is relevant to your research. Now, the keyword there is coherent. Coherent. Now, one of the techniques for developing a coherent literature review that is relevant to your research is that you must go after them. You go after these literature. You don't have these things, they won't come to you. You as a researcher will go after them. Particularly when we're talking about relevant, those ones that are relevant to your research, you go after them. Like I said earlier, you consult materials, you consult books, you consult journals, you consult edited books, That is one way of ensuring that your literature review is coherent. It flows, that the idea flows. When someone is reading your literature review, the person will see that it was well done and the ideas and the presentation flows. That's what we talk about coherent. That's when we talk about being coherent. So one of the preparations that you have to do, or part of the preparations that you have to do, is to go after these. You need to go after them. It is because, why do we say this? Because it's only when you have them that you'll be able to make it coherent. You need to have them. You need to have as many as are relevant to your study. Now, the second one is evaluate relevant ones. You see, if you just you're writing on a particular topic and then you get a literature that does a particular study or publication that does not address what you are doing, you find that at the end of the day, your literature review will not be coherent. It will not flow. So we have a broad field and we have a subfield. So you must be able to gather studies, publications, works that are related to the specific subfield that you're working on. Like for us in linguistics, the linguistics is a very broad field, and we have a subfield we call sociolinguistics. Now, within the sociolinguistics, we also have different subfields. Now, if you want to produce or develop a coherent literature review, you have to go for publications. You have to go for materials that are related to the specific subfield that you're interested in. Otherwise, you just have an incoherent literature review. It must be publications, it must be papers, it must be works that address the specific subfield that you are working on. And then you evaluate them. You evaluate them. How do you do the evaluation? You look out for the ideas. What are the arguments of those documents? Are they related to your own? Are they related to what you're doing? You know, because if you just pick a particular work now or a journal publication because it mentions an aspect of what you're doing and you think, okay, let me just review. So you see, your literature review will not be coherent. It has to be, you have to assess, you have to evaluate those materials, looking out for the ideas. What are the ideas that they're advancing in those studies? What are the arguments of those papers? And are they related to your work? If those arguments or if those ideas that are being advanced in those works are related to your study, then you know you're there. You know that when you bring them up in a literature review, your literature review will be coherent. It will flow. It will just flow naturally. And then the third one is arrange and discuss chronologically using dates of publication. I've mentioned this earlier. You know, this is a very important technique if you must make your literature review to be coherent. This is where most students miss it. If you have 10 studies to review, look out for the date of publication. It is very important, particularly when you are reviewing empirical studies. You look out for the date of publication. If you have a work published in 2020, 2021, and 2009, you start with the one of 2009. So that as you're following that order and as someone is reading, it will be coherent. We'll see the trend of research. We'll see the changes in the argument in that research area. We'll see the differences in the arguments. We'll see the changes in the ideas that are being propounded. So, but if you do it haphazardly, your reader won't be able to see the trend of research, won't be able to see what has changed, at what point has it changed. Or how is there any change in terms of dimension? Is there any change in, because over the years, these things change about research. We can start off with a particular idea now. Maybe it could reign for like a decade. And then the next decade, some scholars will come up with something different. Or there could be an argument that is evoked now in the literature about a particular topic. And then the next year, somebody comes up with a different argument. So it's only when you arrange your review, your particularly empirical studies chronologically using the dates that your reader will appreciate these changes, that your reader will see clearly the changes in the ideas that are being advanced, changes in the arguments that are being held, and on and on and on. And that's what makes it very coherent. That's what makes it really very coherent. And then the last one is synthesis in relation to the problem. You see, before you engage in literature review, you already have a problem. You already have a research problem that you want to address. And it is important that as you review the literature, you try to relate the literature you review to the problem. You try to relate the literature to your problem. What do we mean by relating it to your problem? For each of the literature that you review, you must tell us how it has been able to address the problem that you have raised or the problem of your study. Like I said earlier, nothing is new. Sometimes we just think that something is new because we've not done enough search. If you do extensive research, which in most cases is very difficult to do because we are limited by a number of things, you find out that what you claim is very original must have been done by someone at some point in time. It may not be exactly the way you are doing it. It could be that you are giving it a different dimension. It could be that you're looking at it from a different perspective. And so that is why, if you want to make your literature review coherent, if you want to make it flow, the ideas flow, if you want to make it easy for your reader, then part of what you do is to synthesize the literature, the works, the studies that you cite by relating them to the problem that you have at hand. That will give us a very clear idea of what you're set to do. That will give us an idea of what other people have done and help identify a niche which your study wants to fill. The act of writing a literature review free of plagiarism. Now, plagiarism is a very highly debated issue in research. It's a heated issue in research because we have had cases where researchers have been punished for plagiarism. We have had all sorts of disciplinary measures that meted out to researchers who are not very careful with the issue of plagiarism. And so many universities, even research bodies, take it very seriously, the issue of plagiarism. And as a researcher, one of the areas that exposes you to the temptation of plagiarism is the literature review, because this is where you have to capture the views of others. You have to review other people's works, and that exposes you to temptation of plagiarism. So, and basically, what we mean by plagiarism, when when you steal an intellectual property by stealing there will mean you fail to duly acknowledge the source of it. You come stealing. You give the impression that this is coming from you when actually it's not yours. That's why intellectual property has copyright, because we want to identify the owner. That's why when people say, okay, the copyright of this publication is owned by this person, it means that this is the owner of this intellectual property. And so if you will lift something from there, even if an idea or an argument or whatever, then you have to duly acknowledge the person. Now, we have an art, we have a style, we have a style of writing, a literature review. So we're free from plagiarism. Before I look at that, there is this problem we have amongst modern day researchers. The internet is a trap for most people. Sometimes you just find a material in the internet, and some of them may not be well cited in terms of the owner, the author, the year, and all that. And you could just lift that and place in your work without knowing that even where you got it, maybe the site where you got the information, that they actually got it from someone without acknowledging the source. And then you just lift it. Maybe you think that since there's no author there, so maybe it's nobody's, so you can use it. You see, that's the trap that we have. And then when that material is subjected to a plagiarism check, some of these things will be pointed out. So you can even commit plagiarism advertently or inadvertently. You do it inadvertently when, like the case of the internet that I've mentioned here now, you just lift up something without even knowing that this, even as little as the wordings of what you have picked belong to someone, and you just pick it and place it in the context of your work, and then you won't even know that that's plagiarism. So, and we also have cases where people do that intentionally. Yes, we have cases where people do intentionally, because you see, some people are actually lazy about literature review. It's the most tasking aspect of research. It is something that will make you to sit down. And so some people are not ready to do it. And so now that we have the internet, they just type whatever that will help them source materials related to what they're doing. And then once they see material, just copy and paste. Some people do that. We have cases of people who commit plagiarism intentionally. And then we have unintentionally cases. Now, the key word there in avoiding plagiarism is acknowledgement. You have to duly acknowledge as little as a word that is someone's. So you, as a researcher, you must understand. You see, research is more like, or knowledge production is more like, it's a chain. You don't just have one person in it. You have this person building, and then it builds to a particular level, and then another person builds on top of it, another builds on top of it, and then we keep having knowledge in that field. And so for us as researchers, we understand that you cannot write just on your own. In fact, it's one of the features of academic writing, that you have to write in other voices. So as a researcher, you're dealing with literature review, you're free to cite works, you're free to reference works, but you must duly acknowledge them. You must duly acknowledge them. Very, very important. If you have a collection of words that you picked from a particular work, then you have to acknowledge them, except you're paraphrasing. if you get a sentence or some sentences from a particular work, and then you decide to paraphrase them, then you're free from plagiarism. You try to put them in your own words. You get the idea from it, and then put that in your own word. Fine, it goes. But when once you lift it from there verbatim, then there is need for you to duly acknowledge the person. That's why we're talking about paraphrasing. Because, you know, in writing, academic writing, as a matter of fact, we glean things from here and there. Nobody owns it entirely. Nobody can claim, okay, I wrote this is just on my own. You must have checked one paper or the other. You must have looked at one paper or the other. And then you must have even picked ideas from there, particularly when you're doing literature review. But what we're saying is that you duly acknowledge them. If there is need for you to paraphrase, then you paraphrase. And then if you're doing direct quotes, then you have to duly acknowledge them by citing the person and including the page number where that thing falls within the other person's work. So these are some of the things you have to do. And then, of course, referencing, both the in-text referencing and the full-blown references that we have at the end of the work. So you make sure that every in-text citation reflects in the list, in the reference list. You know, some people take it very seriously. Some schools take it very seriously that if they find out, if the committee or the panel that is examining you finds out that you have up to 5 entries that are not reflected in the list, and then you fail. You fail. And sometimes these things are inadvertently done by students. It's not that they know, but they pay for their carelessness. They pay for their carelessness because the impression you're giving is that you own this thing. You're not trying to acknowledge the source. So this is area that you need to be very, very careful. Every in-text citation must be reflected in the list. Anything you cite, you must give full entry of it in the references. And of course, even when you're writing, there are words, expressions that you pick from people, you duly acknowledge them, and then you'll be free from plagiarism. All right. The strategies to identify research gaps and missing links in the literature. The strategies. Now, the key word there is strategy. How do we identify research gaps and missing links in the literature? The first thing there is decide on the range to cover. You see, you have to decide the range of studies or works to cover in your literature review. You can decide to say, okay, I'm doing this work in 2021, and so I'll be giving priority to works that were published in the last 5 years. That's fine. It means that you've defined the range. Now, if you don't do that, you find out that at the end of the day, you will not be able to identify gaps, research gaps. You will not be able to identify research gaps. And then tell us how your own study fills that gap. So you have to decide on the range to cover. Usually we say, okay, last 5 years. If you're doing a study in 2021, it means that the studies and the literature that you capture has to be ones within the last 5 years. That will help you. That will be like a check for you so that you have a range that you're working with and you'll be able to capture the works or publications that are within that range so that you'll be able to identify the gap or missing links. Now, go for researches within the range. Once you decide on the range that you're going to cover, go for publications, go for studies that were done within the range of time, within the period that you have selected. This also by way of explaining extent and extent. It has to be publications, has to be works that are recent. Go for those ones that are within that range. Because only when you focus on those ones that you'll be able to identify the gap in literature. The gap. What do we mean by gap? What has been done? This research has looked at this issue from this dimension. This research has looked at this issue from this dimension. This other research has looked at this issue from this dimension. Now, it appears that no research has looked at this issue from this direction. That becomes a research gap. That becomes a gap in literature, which your study intends to fill. And part of the ways that you identify this gap is by going for researches within a particular range of time which you have selected. And another way to identify this gap is to evaluate them. You need to evaluate them. You see, people just, people don't even devote time to reading other people's works. Part of the things that were taught academic writing is for you to have the patience of reading other people's works, not just glancing through them. You need to read other people's works. That's one of the ways of evaluating them. That's the only way you can indeed evaluate the studies. You need to read them. Because there are things you can't just pick from glancing through them. You may not be able to identify the major objectives if you glance through them. You may not be able to identify the methodology, details of the methodology used. You may not be able to identify the major findings and then the conclusion. And these are very important in evaluating a work. These are the indices that will help you identify the ideas that are being advanced by that study or the argument of that study. So you evaluate them. How do you evaluate? You read them, you study them, you identify these things about those ones, and then it will help you to know what this study is all about, what this study is all about, what this study is all about, so that you now see clearly the gap in literature that's not been filled. Now, the other one, strategy is following chronological order. I mentioned that earlier. That is very, very important. You see, it keeps popping up in all these discussions that we've had so far. Following chronological order. Most students don't take it seriously. There is no how you identify a gap in literature without looking at the sequence, being sequential in your evaluation of researches. Because if, for instance, you pick a research in 2019 and you evaluate that research done in 2019 and you identify the argument of that paper, and then it could be that in 2022 or 2020, another person has looked at that same issue from a different perspective, and there is another argument in relation to the subject matter. So, and then you also look at maybe 2021, there's another study, a different dimension. So, but when you review haphazardly, you won't see this gap. If you review a work of 2019 and then you start with the work of 2021 and then you go back to work of 2019 and then you come to work of 2018, no, it won't flow. It will be difficult for you to actually satisfactorily say you've identified a gap. Sometimes if we're very cursory about it, if we're not detailed about this, we often make conclusions about gaps that are wrong. Some people will come and tell you, okay, no study has done so thing. When in fact they were not detailed in looking at the studies and looking at the literature. So before you come to a particular conclusion, before you identify a research gap, you have to pay close attention to the trend of research. And how do you identify the trend of research? It is by looking at the studies, evaluating the studies, paying attention to the year of publication. Because knowledge over the years, knowledge advances, knowledge is moderated, knowledge is altered. That's what happens in research. That's why someone can just tell us that if you move up now, you come down this year. And then the next year, someone else will come and say, no, there is a change based on this research, based on the factors I've studied. There's a change in this. And then another person will say, okay, based on this, there is, you see, that's how knowledge is. And so for you, who you are reviewing the literature, you must pay attention to that. That's the only way you'll be able to identify the trend. What is happening in this area? How, where did it start? Where is it now? It's very, very important. And then the last one is focus on identifying trends and dimensions. That's just what I've explained now. Yes. One of the strategies is to focus on the trends and dimensions. What are they saying now? What's the pattern of argument? What are the ideas that are being advanced? Are there dimensions to them from these different perspectives and all that? Methods for evaluating publications in order to determine which literature contributes significantly to your work. Now, evaluating publications in order to determine which literature contributes significantly to your work. Now, we are simply saying here, how do you, because when you are reviewing literature, it is important that you identify those ones that contribute significantly to your work. And how do you do that? That's what we're saying. How do you identify those ones? How do you evaluate those publications to know that they significantly contribute to your work? Now, you see, every work must have a concept or concepts that are related to it. You must have methods. You must have theories. Now, for you to identify a literature, a publication that contributes significantly to your work, it must speak to the concept. It must speak to the methodology. It must speak to the theory. So, in evaluating publications, if you pick a particular publication, maybe publication A or publication B, or a research A or research B. Now, and that same research is built around a concept that you have adopted in your own. That is number one method of knowing that that publication contributes significantly to your work. If that research addresses the concept that you're working on, then it is significant. It will significantly contribute to your work because of you are talking about a particular concept, and this other study has also addressed that concept. Then it will significantly contribute to your work. It qualifies to be reviewed. It qualifies to be captured. And then the method. You have methodological frameworks. If you have a research or a publication and you want to know whether this research or publication significantly contributes to your own work, does it speak to the methodology that you propose in your own study? Does it speak to it? Does it address the methodology? Is it a moderation of the methodology you propose to work with? Then it will significantly contribute to your own work. And then theories. You look at the theoretical framework. if you pick a particular research and then you want to know, evaluate the publication to know whether it significantly contributes to your own research, you have to look out for the theory. Is the theory relevant to your own? Does the theory address or account for the same thing that you're doing? Did that study apply that particular theory? How is the theory applied? Now, if you identify that link, then it means that that study significantly contributes to your own work. You know, because when you are able to do this, you number one, you'll be able to capture these in your own review, in the conceptual review, in the talking about the methodology, and then talking about the theory. You'll be able to capture these positions of this particular work, and you now, that will be part of justification, even if in terms of method, that will be part of one of the ways of justifying your choice of that particular method. So a publication that significantly contributes to your work is one that addresses the concepts that you're interested in, or speaks to the concepts that you're interested in your own study. Number two, it speaks to the method that you propose to adopt for your own study, or it addresses the method. Number three, it speaks to the theory that you're interested in, or it addresses the theory. And the very last one is that it significantly makes contribution to knowledge in that area. It significantly makes contribution to knowledge. It could be in terms of advancing an idea. It could be in terms of widening an argument. There must be something significant that that study makes that is relevant to your own in that subject area. So, for instance, you can just have a study now that there's a particular idea that is trending in that area, and then a study interrogates that idea, for instance, proposing a different one. That's a significant contribution it's making to knowledge. It could be an argument, and then this other study is coming up with a different argument about that thing. That's a significant contribution. So you look out for these things in any publication. What are the ideas? Is it relevant to mine? And is there any contribution that this is making? What are the arguments? Is it relevant to mine? And what are the contributions that this study is making with regard to this argument? It can also be in form of intervention. We have studies that make specific interventions about a subject area. So when you identify a study that makes a specific intervention about a particular area, then it qualifies to be reviewed, and you can say that significantly contributes to your work. Let's look at the last one. Criteria for deciding which literature to cite. Number one is that it must be extant. It has to be recent. If you are doing a research like now in 2021, at most last 5 years. If you now begin to cite a work of 1989, 1979, 1969, they're not relevant. It does not qualify to be there. It has to be recent. It has to be extant and not extinct. It's very, very important that when you are looking out for literature to cite, consider the date of publication. Consider the date of publication. Otherwise, you're dealing with history. You'll be giving us old knowledge. That will not be relevant. Because knowledge changes over time. So you focus on those ones that are recent and That's it. And then the next one, difference or similarity in conceptual, methodological, and theoretical postulations. Like I said earlier, these are three important aspects that you have to focus on: the concept, the method, and the theoretical postulations. Any literature that you should cite in your work must either be different or similar to the concepts that you're dealing with. It must be different or similar to the methodology that you're proposing. What I mean by difference in terms of applying it, maybe there could be difference in the application of it, but it must speak to that particular methodology. And then theoretical, the theory that you've adopted, it must speak to that theory. So, because when you do that in your literature review, you clearly show, you reveal to your reader what this person has done, what this person has done, what this person has done, and why you're doing your own. So you focus on the concepts for you to cite any literature. The concepts that you're working with, is it similar to this one? In terms of difference, has this work applied that concept differently, or does the work apply the concept the same way you intend to apply it? That's it. And then methodology. What's you want to cite a particular literature, you consider what's the methodology of that study. Is it similar to the one you propose? Has this study applied it differently? And then theoretical postulations. A particular theory. Does this study apply this particular theory that I want to use? If it doesn't apply, which other theory does it apply? If that theory is not related to yours, then there's no need to cite it. But if that theory is related to yours, then you tell us how you find that if it has adopted that theory, and then that qualifies it to be cited. And then similarity or difference relating to arguments and ideas. That's another criterion for deciding which literature to cite. Arguments and ideas. These are what makes a research. Arguments or ideas or debates. And so you focus on these things. If a particular literature or a particular study advances arguments or debates or discussions on a concept that you're interested in, then it's what being cited. So you look out for these things: the recency of the literature, how is it related to your own study in terms of a concept, in terms of methods and theory, and very importantly, in terms of the arguments and ideas that you are interested in. Okay, so I think this is the last subheading. Okay, so by way of conclusion, you see, like I said when we were starting off, a literature review is very central to the entire research venture. It is so because without the literature review, you cannot do the scholarly work. You cannot do a scholarly research. Part of what makes your research scholarly is your ability to review literature. And number two, it is tasking. When we talk about research being tedious or tasking, we refer to two aspects of research, which is literature review and field work. So it is very, very tasking. You have to sit down. You have to sit down. You have to consult books. You have to go for these books. You have to go for these materials. These things are not on the surface. They are not on the surface. So you have to put in a lot of work to be able to come up with a very good literature. So from what we have said so far, I believe that you now understand the rudiments of writing a very good literature review. And I've done this sharing my experiences. These are not documented anywhere in any book. What I've just told you now, all I've told you, they are just from the experiences I've had in research, learning from my supervisors, teaching other students, and in the course of applying these things. So this is purely practical oriented. We're not talking about theory here. And I believe that with what we have heard today, you'll be able to come up with a very good literature review any day, anytime. So I'm open to answering your questions so that we'll, at the end of this day, at the end of this lecture, we'll be able to say we've learned something. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chima, for this insightful training. I hope we all have been able to get a thing or two from it. So we are now open to questions. So we have two types of questions. The first one that we'll answer are the questions directly related to this training. And then after we are done, we will then answer one or two questions related to the company. So if anyone has a question, like general question about the company, you can ask later. But for now, let's ask questions regarding the training. So you guys have this opportunity to chat directly with Dr. Chima and ask any question that you might have regarding how to review literature. So this is how I'm going to do it. You have to raise your hand. Raise your hand if you have a question, and then I will ask you to unmute. Then you can directly talk to Doctor. Those who are shy and cannot, you can always type the question on the comment section, then I'll read it out for Doctor to answer. So anyone who has a question?
Eleanor, also hope we did not murder the name.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the very insightful presentation, Doctor. And I thank you very much. It has been really, really insightful. But I have a question. You have, throughout the presentation, emphasized the fact that the material that you review has to be recent. So my question is, there are really some topics which are well researched and you can have a lot of material to your disposal, but there are really those topics that haven't really received much research. So how far back can I go to obtain my material in terms of years or decades? Thank you very much. I hope my question is clear.
Eliane, thank you very much for your kind words. You talked about my emphasis on recency of the materials that are reviewed, them being recent. And then you talked about the challenge of conducting research in a particular area where you don't have a large body of work. You just have maybe very scanty body works done in that area. Well, yeah, that's a problem actually, because if you have that kind of situation, it's going to be a problem, a big challenge for you as a researcher. And that is why we encourage students or researchers to, before you begin research, before even you choose a topic to research on, you need to be sure that you have materials, that you have literature, rich literature in that area. It's part of the things that we encourage students to do. And it's also part of what you taking out time to read literature will help you identify before even you begin your research. So students are always encouraged to make sure. And how do you make sure? You read books, you consult the literature on that subject matter. So you need to be sure that you have materials in that field. It is an area that has rich literature. But if for any reason you didn't do that, like me, if I identify that I have a supervisor and I ask the supervisor to go and read up literature on that subject, and then she or he comes back to tell me that he or she does not see enough literature in that subject, I will try to discourage the student from going into that. So, but if for any reason you find yourself in that position, it becomes a challenge. It becomes a challenge because you can't just build on nothing. Research is built on something. It's like a chain. So, but then you can explain that to your panel, or you can clearly specify that in your report. Maybe writing, beginning the literature review, you let your reader understand that, oh, you had a challenge, or a part of the limitations of studies that you couldn't find enough materials, recent materials on this subject matter. Maybe they'll just allow it go. But it's a sign that you didn't do thorough pre-research work, because what you do before even you venture into any area, you must be sure that there are researches, previous researches, and there are recent ones. Thank you. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does really help. Thank you very much.
I think I have a question here from someone.
Okay.
Ayaka, sorry if I didn't get it well. It says, thank you for taking your time to do this. We really do appreciate it. I would like to know how one can make sure what you have is relevant to your work without wasting time in reading the whole literature, only to find out it's not what you are looking for. Well, that's why we have an abstract. That's why we have an abstract. If you have a good abstract, but unfortunately, we have people who write theses and works and they don't have good abstracts. A good abstract is one that captures the major objectives of the study, the methodology of the study, the major findings of the study, the conclusion, and recommendations, if any. Once you have these 5 items, it makes a good abstract. And if these 5 items are there, you won't bother yourself. You won't have to bother yourself reading the entire work, because all the things that you're looking for, they're already there. But it becomes a problem when you don't have a good abstract. So, because some people just do a chapter summary and they call it an abstract. Some people you just have one sentence that speaks to the crux of the work and they call it an abstract. So and you see some people devote all the time on to foregrounding. That's what I call foregrounding in research. Before you just try to lay background before you tell us what that research is all about. People do that often in abstract. So when you find that kind of situation, it becomes a problem for you. So it means that you have to go through the entire work. But if you have a paper that has a very good abstract, and by that I mean contains these 5 items, then once you read the abstract, you won't have to bother reading the entire thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chima, for that expository training. It's quite insightful. On my side, maybe I would think I know what literature review is, but now I know I didn't know anything before. Let me put it that way. So from today, I think my knowledge has been expanded in terms of literature review, and I hope others agree with me as well for this. Okay, so without wasting much time, what I will just talk about is we'll have series of trainings coming up, like Elizabeth said, and do well to follow us on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and the rest of them, and also do visit the blog page. On that blog page, you will see wonderful articles made free for you to actually go through and learn a lot. More specifically, that on how to write a well-detailed and accepted problem statement. That piece is written by Dr. Chima, and if you read it, I think you will also agree with me that it's a wonderful one, and that will aid you. Okay, another thing I want to bring up here is that, like as I said, we'll have series of trainings that will come up, and one of the most important one is funding. One thing about postgraduate studies is ordinarily it's supposed to be a paid service. Let me put it that way. You're supposed to do your postgraduate studies and get paid for it, meaning you have fundings from funding agencies. But it will amaze you to hear that fundings are there, but there is one big problem. Most of us don't have all it takes to write an award-winning proposal for those fundings. Hence, we fall short. It's either we don't know about the fundings or we don't know how to write an award-winning proposals for those fundings. So this is part of the things we want to bring your way, because there is one saying we've actually come to debunk. That saying that says that postgraduate studies is a lonely journey. We've come to debunk it. In this company, we'll come to let you know that postgraduate studies is not a lonely journey, and we will prove it to you, because it's still the same thing as though you are doing your undergraduate studies and you are in classrooms with your mates. Though the topics might differ, the titles might differ, areas of research might differ, but there are ways of sharing knowledge that will not leave you alone. I think it's high time this issue of depression because you are doing research must stop. Hence, we are building this community for us to come together, learn from one another. Those things that stresses you, you learn from the other person. So do follow us, and in due course, we'll create the community, a Telegram group or on Facebook, where you always pop in and ask your questions and have someone answer those questions to you. It's high time you come out of your shell. It's high time you come out of the isolation and join the community that will look after each other. Okay, so like as I said, the training on the fundings will be announced via our various platforms. That is why you should do well to connect. And then visit our page, the service pages, and see the kind of services we render. Wonderful ones, free ones, and the ones you paid some little amount of money. I call it little because there's not amount of money you pay that can actually substantiate the amount of knowledge you get. And that knowledge goes with you. So I think that is all I have to say. And the last thing I will say, emphasize on this. This is a community of researchers. Let's come together and build one another towards research. In that lonely journey, we will make it a vibrant one, and it will no longer be lonely. You are not alone, we are all together. Thank you all. I hand over to Elizabeth to conclude the training.
Thank you, Chairman. That was all for today. Does anyone have a question for the company? We will take 1 or 2 questions. General question about the company, something that you're curious about. Okay, I think I don't see any hands up. So I will assume that we are all okay, and yeah, I've shared the link as I said. So please, a reminder once again to fill in the attendance register. It's important so that we can send you the exact details for the next training. So with that being said, I would like to thank you all once again for joining us for this training. Without you, we wouldn't have done it. So see you guys in our next training, and hopefully we'll keep in touch in our social media handles. If you have any difficulties regarding your research, you can always go there and pop in a question. We can see how to help you out. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Chima. Without you also wouldn't be here. Thank you for all the attendees, and we'll see you in our next training. Have a great day further, and bye-bye, everyone.